Hello, everybody. This is Political. It's Wednesday night, or it's Thursday morning for us here in the UK, and we've just finished watching the vice presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Mike Pence. We're going to be putting out a couple of videos later today, specifically focusing on the performance of the candidates. But for now, we're making a very quick reaction video, just kind of giving the initial feedback to the debates, especially because most of the mainstream media is going to be focusing on Mike Pence's pink eye and the unfortunate fly that landed on his head. So again, this is Political. My name's Connor Allen, and I'm here with my co-host, as always, Ryan Smith.
Hello, everyone. I just say as well that fly was very, very privileged, not unfortunate.
To be touching the head of the great Mike Pence,
Exactly.
who I think by all means came up as the winner in this debate. And I mean, we're going to be talking about this later. Before we get into this, I guess, shall we just kind of talk about the moderator's performance? Obviously, a completely different performance to Chris Wallace in last week's debate, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's interesting because in the last debate, I think the main topic, the main thing trending on Twitter was Chris Wallace initially, because, like he said before the debate, if he's done a good job, then people will forget he was even there, and that obviously was the complete opposite case. I think in this case, Susan Page basically did a pretty all right job. I'd still say a lot of the questions were kind of set up. They felt like they were a little bit set up for Harris.
Like the penultimate question where she said President Trump has refused to back a peaceful transition of power. So have you had a talk with Joe Biden about it? Very almost a biased question, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's a very...
An unbiased way of framing that question would just be with the
would you commit to a peaceful transition
yeah,
of power?
would you
Like,
commit to a
something like
peaceful
that.
transition of power? Or do you think there will be a peaceful transition of power, or whatever? Or does your side commit to it exactly? But it was just framed like anti-Trump, and obviously, as Pence mentioned as well, which was great. I'm really glad he did. Clinton came out and said that Biden should not accept the results of the election under any circumstance. So. That was an example of a bad question, but I think overall, she wasn't too strict. She let Pence kind of go over his time a little bit. She let Harris go over her time a little bit on some occasions. And if they've still got like a bit of an answer and they're still, and they need 10, 15 seconds or whatever, then that's fine. Like, there's no need to like be so strict on it. So just in that regard, like, she was mostly silent when they were talking, which was great.
Yeah, absolutely. She didn't become part of the debate in a way. Do you think she was perhaps a bit too stifling of the debate? Because I mean, it felt very different, didn't it? It didn't feel as free flowing as Trump calling Biden out for various things.
Do you know what I think the issue was? Is that this was an hour and a half, which I have to say is what, like, flew by. I honestly, I looked at the clock and I was like, "What? There's 20 minutes left," which is crazy. Which is great because it just shows that it was enjoyable. But I think the issue was that there were just too many questions because it seemed like Susan Page felt pressured to move on to the next topic because of time limits. And what I would have preferred to have seen is one or two less topics. And just kind of let the candidates take the conversation a little bit where they want, obviously without going off too much of a tangent, because there was a bit of back and forth at times, and it felt like either side definitely moved on to the next topic. They moved on to the next topic, and both sides felt like, I had more to say there, So I think probably would have been better as if there were less topics, certainly. So I think that's probably the main issue with regards to that.
Do you think she should have perhaps enforced or laid down the law a bit more? And I'm thinking here particularly about the question of packing the Supreme Court, which we'll be talking about a bit later. But Harris did refuse to answer that.
She refused to answer it, but what she did do is she basically allowed Pence to be the one that scrutinized her, which was great, and he just absolutely nailed her on that. And I think that was probably if there was one thing he had to really nail and get right, it was that, because it completely exposed their position
I
on it.
mean, yeah, I mean, going into kind of the key point in a debate, or if you had to have one takeaway from tonight, for me, it's that moment. For me, it's the question on the SCOTUS pick. Is it the same for you?
Yeah, I think so. I really do. Like coming into it, that was the thing that Pence had to get right. There were a few issues that I think a lot of Trump supporters would agree, that there were just issues that Trump really didn't push Biden on in the other debate. Mm-hmm. I think Pence basically got all of them here. There's only one which I think he really missed out on, and that was obviously on Harris' criticism of Biden during the primaries, because she kept talking about him like they were great friends, and obviously it just is hard to believe when the things that she said. But yeah, like one moment that was the moment that really stood out for me.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and she was left visibly shaken, wasn't she? I mean, she just didn't know how to respond, and you could see her thinking. You could see her kind of being tilted a bit and panicking a bit, and she comes out with this completely nonsensical answer. Then not only that, she fails to answer the question, and then Pence highlights it.
Yeah,
every single person who watched that debate walks away from that knowing that Pence at least scored a point on her there.
Yeah, 100%.
Wait, go on.
No, well, I mean,
I guess we've been mentioning Pence's name so much, and it's because just a rock solid performance. At least for me, obviously we're gonna hear your opinion on it in a second, Giant. But for me, I mean, it's possibly goes down as one of the all-time classic performances. I don't think he put a foot wrong at all throughout that entire debate.
I think I would need a little bit of time to mull over it to determine whether or not I would give it that much praise. I think you're right when you say he didn't put a foot wrong, though. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. He didn't stumble. There were a couple of times where it's like, is he going to stumble here? And he just sort of brought it together, and he just came off. It's a very calming character, isn't he? He's a very calming character. Like when you listen to him and just the way he carries himself, you think, wow, yeah, like I like a model vice president. I think, in all honesty, like someone who you feel like you could rely on, but also they're not like taking and stealing the limelight. They're not obsessed about. The worst thing you want, I think, as a vice president is someone who seems desperate to be president. So,
I mean, when you're saying that, I mean, I guess you can kind of draw the parallel. Mike Pence's performance there more or less correlates to Joe Biden's performance for Barack Obama in 2008, 2012, where Joe Biden's performance in the vice presidential debate arguably injected the Obama campaign with a huge boost of enthusiasm and a huge boost of a kind of almost presidential aura. And I think that's what Pence has done there. And for the reasons you're saying, he projects this aura of calmness, and you can't shake him. You just can't rustle him at all, no matter how hard they tried. And I mean, he just nailed every single thing he brought up. He absolutely nailed. So, fracking. Absolutely nailed Kamala Harris and fracking. In terms of security, national security, General Soleimani. In terms of, he was so great in criticizing the mainstream media, wasn't he? Because I mean, anyone who's been on the conservative side of the internet for a while was used to seeing those points, but out there in the open, that's quite a feat, no?
Yeah, that response that he had towards the end, where Harris again tried to perpetuate this lie about the fine people both sides, and we've talked about this. It just, I mean, I feel like really bored of defending Trump on this, because it's anyone who just spends a small amount of time doing a little bit of research, knows the facts on this. But what was great is rather than just coming to Trump's defense, he really just spun it into an attack and said, like, this is why people don't trust the media anymore, because Harris has been perpetuating this lie, Biden's been perpetuating this lie, and they've been enabled by the media who refuse to call them out on it and allow them and enable them to continue it. And I just thought that was great the way he spun that around, and he was like, this is why people don't trust the media, because of basically all this BS that they're talking about and trying to make Trump look in this particular light. The man's condemned white supremacy God knows how many times at this point, that it's just frustrating to have to just keep going on about it, because they keep bringing it up even though it's plainly false. So, but I thought, yeah, that was a really brilliant. Like you said, he really nailed all the key points there. Fracking, the SCOTUS we talked about, Qasem Soleimani and national security, and with Biden being hesitant. Obviously, he said he was against sort of taking out bin Laden as well before then. So, like, just I think really highlighted all of the weaknesses, highlighted Trump's strengths. Like, if I was to rate Pence's performance, it would be like 9 out of 10.
Yeah, for me, I think it's a 10 out of 10 because, I mean, where did he go wrong? In terms of attack, he was lethal. He nailed the opponent exactly where it hurt. In terms of defence, he put out very articulate, very easy to understand defences of Trump on some of the major attacking points of the opposition campaign.
Yeah.
For me, it's a 10 out of 10. Well, that brings us on to Kamala Harris, who didn't have such a great night, at least in my opinion. I think she was her attacks were blunted by Pence. Her defenses, she didn't bother trying to defend most of the questions. She just talked about different things.
Yeah, I listen, the biggest strength that Harris is always going to have, or just the Democrats have, obviously, the biggest strength that they have is going in and having the luxury of not being the administration that had to deal with the biggest pandemic that we've faced in 100 years, the biggest health crisis that we've faced globally in 100 years. They're not the administration. It's very easy to scrutinize absolutely everything that the current administration's done because obviously they're not in power. So we know that was always going to be their strength. I think Pence, like, really had great answers and defended himself as well as he could, but she, I think, just did, like a poor job of pressing that, and they talked about it for a long time. They really did talk about it for a long time, and she didn't really, it wasn't very piercing in the attacks. It was just the same old virtue signaling, really. And I just think Pence had really good answers for it, and he had answers based upon policy as well. And I just called them out on obviously the stuff that they've been called out on about the China ban and all that kind of stuff. So he did about as well as he could there. And
it's interesting you mention about the current administration being at a disadvantage here, because again, Pence really stood up to the mark, and he was attacking Harris on Biden's record, right? And I think one of the standout moments of the night was talking about Kayla Mueller, who's the aid worker who was executed by ISIS, and he quite correctly points out that Biden opposed the raid. If he had acted more swiftly, Kayla Mueller would have been alive. He pointed out her family was in the audience, and then she was completely stumped. All she could say was, "I'm so sorry."
Yeah,
I mean, that's
a
nightmare moment
as well, isn't it? It's an admission.
I have nightmares about that, about being so completely taken aback by a question. I'm sat there on stage going, "I'm so sorry."
Yeah, it was an admission of guilt. It wasn't. She couldn't defend Biden's record there. It was.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he did a terrible job. I'm sorry. I mean, basically, that's the subtext there. Like, if you just say apologize, it's an admission of guilt, is the way I see it. So, yeah, and I tell you what, as well, the thing about Harris is, and Biden did this as well. It really irritates me when they just sit there and rattle off these pre-scripted responses to the camera, like, "Oh, we're talking to you, the American people," it just comes across as so transparent. It's so fake, and I don't know. I imagine obviously some people feel like it's genuine, but for me, I just it feels like trained behavior, I guess. I feel like a team of people who have done some research on focus groups or whatever and all this kind of stuff have said, oh, if you look to the camera, it really helps and makes the voters feel like you're connected and speaking to them. But for me, it just comes across as really trained and really disingenuous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's almost contempt for debate, isn't it? Because you have no interest in actually debating. You have an interest in delivering your pre-scripted lines to the camera. Did you notice? I noticed Pence looking at the camera a lot. I think he learned from the first debate. Obviously, he wasn't in it, but he learned the lessons from the first debate. And I think Pence, at the very least, equaled Harris in terms of those powerful moments looking towards the camera and connecting with the American people.
Yeah, but I think with Pence, the thing is, like, if you're doing it every single time, the way Harris does, then it loses its effectiveness anyway. I think with Pence, it was more like sometimes he's looking over and he's speaking to Harris. Sometimes he's looking over to Susan Page, the moderator, and kind of like. But when he's looking where he's looking, when he's looking at Susan Page, it's because he's referencing the question that she's asked. When he's looking at Kamala Harris, it's because he's referencing or talking about something that she was just mentioning. It's a part of her retort. When he's looking at the camera, it's because that's the bit that he wants the American people to pay attention to. I'm talking to you now at this moment in time. But with Harris, it was just like, and Biden did it. Oh, I'm being asked a question. Oh, I'm just going to go look to the camera now, and almost like they're, they're a news anchor or something. Like sitting and looking to the camera, and then they turn around and they swivel in their chair, and then they look to the other camera. And do you know what I mean? Like that very choreographed
they give a cheeky wink and a smile,
yeah,
and start rolling off something else.
And I mean, I don't want to get into like too much on mannerisms and things like this, and talk about characteristics, but I do feel that Harris is at this disadvantage where she just has this tendency to come off as like really smarmy, the way she just kind of laughs and smiles and do this and she.
The worst was when she and you were saying this before whilst we were watching it. She was almost expecting Pence to interrupt her because she had it prepared, didn't she?
Yeah.
And you could tell a couple of times he said something, and he objectively didn't interrupt her, but she immediately launched into this. Yeah, I'm talking. Yeah,
I'm speaking, Mr. President. I'm speaking, Mr. Vice President. Okay. And yeah. She obviously planned that beforehand, and they were desperate, weren't they? They were absolutely desperate for Pence to interrupt, so that they could do that and be like, come off as, oh look, they're just coming and speaking over us again, and all this kind of, like with the first debate.
Speaking over a woman, oh my goodness.
Oh no, yeah, I know you're used to that, Mr. Pence. You speak over your wife, I'm sure, at home, but actually, I'm the Attorney General. So,
and that would have been the line. That would have absolutely been the line. Do you have anything else to say, or shall we wrap up here?
No, I think that's it. Like, overall, I think Pence's performance, I say 9 out of 10 just because he didn't really scrutinize Harris on her comments on Biden, but that's, to me, is the only thing that I think he really missed out on. Everything else he did a fantastic job. So, well done, Mr. Pence. There's 2 thumbs up from me.
It's a very well done from Mr. Pence. From me too. A double thumbs up also from me. I'm going to be slightly nicer than you. I'm going to give him 10 out of 10. Thanks so much for listening, guys. Again, like we said at the start of the video, we'll be putting out some more videos on the debate and the performance. Please do subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the content. Give us a like if you like the content, and leave us a comment if you want to share your opinion with us. Thanks, guys.